The first time I came to realize there was more in the woods or Olympic National Forest was over 10 years ago. Back then, I was in my early 40s, in great shape, and life was good on every angle. Now, I understand that nowadays people have a lot of struggles, but for me, I grew up having a father who amassed a whole hell of a lot of wealth. And that allowed me as a young man just to pursue my hobby and my interests. My number one hobby and passion was wildlife biology. I'd always loved wildlife and the outdoors. And at age 40, I was living my dream. But in 2013, everything changed. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever woken up from a dream and felt like it was real? Most people have. Well, imagine experiencing something you wish was a dream and having to come to grips with the fact that it was real. And no matter how many times you tell yourself it didn't happen, the empirical evidence is constantly in front of you and your body bears the scars to prove it. I'll never, ever forget this day, July 15th. The details of my report are sketched in my mind. 74.7 degrees, light wind, sunny day, the epitome of beauty. I started out that day like any other day of my life. I had been to this location 6 times already and never had an issue in these woods. Now, if you want to know the area, I'm happy to share it with you. I advise you not to go there, but I'm more than happy to share it with you. It's upriver 6 miles east of Fork. I was there doing an assessment on the river ecosystem and its effect on the river otters. Now, if you're asking yourself, how in the hell did you get an assignment to study river otters? The crazy thing is, it goes back to all the climate change activists that have come into this field over the past 20 years. You see, back in the day, people understood that the climate was affected by the sun, that everything on this planet was affected by one powerful force and one powerful force alone, that is the sun. But over the years, we had these woke people sneak in who worship Mother Gaia, Mother Earth, and they believe deep down in their hearts that human beings are a virus that are killing this planet, despite the evidence that this planet is millions of years old. So I'm going to stop right there and get off my soapbox and let me go back to my story. Anyway, I'm there right along the riverbanks when I see these 2 otters come swimming down the river. No problem. It's 2 otters. They're swimming. Cool. That's what I'm here for, right? Then I see 4 more, then 6 more, then 8 more, then 12 more. Next thing you know, it's 40 of these otters swimming downriver directly at me. Imagine the scene. I'm down on one knee, I got my backpack on my back, and I have my notebook and pen in hand. I need you to understand something. 2 otters aren't dangerous at all. You can kick them away from you, going about your business. 5 or 10 can be a problem. 20 to 30, you got a problem on your hands. Next thing I know, I'm under full assault by these otters for no reason whatsoever. Now I'm scrambling up the side of the riverbank, trying to get away from them, kicking them off of me. They're biting my ankles, biting my legs. I got my backpack whipped off my back. I'm swinging the backpack with one hand. I'm swinging my notebook with the other hand, trying to get these things away from me. When I finally get up on top of the riverbank, away from the water, they all turn and retreat. Now listen to me when I say this to you. An incident like that is not only just traumatic to you, but it has these negative connotations on the rest of your career. You know, because I go back to the field office, I'm telling people bada bing, bada boom, what's going on. And next thing you know, everybody starts calling me the Otterman. Listen to me. Now listen to me and listen to me good. It's okay when people make fun of you. You know, I got tough skin. I'm not worried about it. But Otterman, come on, bro. That was the worst freaking nickname I could have ever been given. I'm talking about traveling to national conferences and people on the national level calling me the Otterman. So guess what? I decided I was going to embrace the whole thing. I am the Otterman. You want to call me Otterman? I'm Otterman. Guess what? I specialize in otters. Nonetheless, a few days later, I go back to the same location. Am I trepidatious? Yes, absolutely. 100% trepidatious about going back to the exact same spot where otters jumped me. But I go there anyway. Why? Because I'm not a coward and I get paid to do my job. This time I'm there and I'm saying to myself, there's no possible way that something like this could ever happen again. That was a freak accident, right? Nope, wrong. Wrong, wronger than wrong could possibly be. Because as I'm there, standing at the edge of the water, I look up and no, it's not 5 or 10 otters. It looks like 200 freaking otters coming down the river at the same time. It's so many of them that they are making their own waves in the water. Scares the living out of me. So much so that I climb back up the riverbank and I watch as they all go by. And right then and there is when the weirdness starts to happen. Now, hit the pause button in your imagination for a moment and let me explain something to you. You should be seeing those otters going right down the river in your mind. But pause right here. Let me say this. I've heard a lot of Dogman witnesses say stuff like, the area went quiet. And I don't really know how accurate that is because that's not exactly what I experienced. What I experienced was this motionlessness, like this still. You know, quietness is like there wasn't a sound. No, I heard them otters in the water, but it was just like this stillness came around the area around, like everything around me started to slow down and it was just still. I'm standing there looking at those otters when I get this feeling, that feeling of someone running up on me. And I turn to my right, there it is, the worst thing I've ever seen in my life. 7 foot tall, skinny, emaciated, lightly sparsed fur on his chest. You could see this thing's rib cage. And I don't know if it was expecting for nobody to be there, because the look on his face was one of surprise, like, whoa, hold on, there's a human here. I look at it, it looks at me. I look at it, and it looks at me. Now, I need you to understand something. The speed at which this thing came up on me was like that comic book cartoon character Blur. I felt it coming, I saw the blur, and then it was right there standing in front of me, like it came to a dead screeching stop. No sliding, no nothing. And the last thing I remember was turning my attention from its eyes to its nose and observing the moisture on the tip of its nose. And then my vision started to go. I woke 3 hours later, terrified, laying on my back. And as I began the process of rolling over, coming to my senses to stand up, I realized that I'm standing in a freaking pile of bones. And I'm not talking about 1 or 2 bones. I'm talking about 100, 200 different types of bones. Otter bones, even bear skulls. Now listen to me when I say this to you. I can't tell you that this dog man did anything intentionally to physically hurt me. I can't. Now granted, when I stood up and looked down at my leg, it was bleeding. My pants were torn. It had claw marks in it. And my skin had these bruise marks on it, like it grabbed me by the leg and started dragging me, and then dropped me right there. I'm standing there looking around. I've already observed the fact that my pants legs are torn and that there's blood on my pants leg. And then I just start to run. Didn't care about direction, didn't care about anything. I just ran, and I ran, and I ran, and I ran, and I ran. And somewhere along the line of me just hauling ass through the woods, all of my training kicked in. I remember figuring out my bearing, and I remember turning and going in a direction towards my vehicle. The next thing I remember after that was getting inside the vehicle and closing the door. And not so much the motion of getting inside and closing the door, more so the feeling of safety, security. Like, okay, it can't get me in here. Then I remember being at home in bed. I don't remember driving back out of there. I don't remember anything but being at home and in the bed. The following day, I called in to work and said I wasn't coming in. And then the day after that, my boss insisted that I come in to work. Now, I need you to understand something. I'm known as the Otterman. There was no way on the planet that I was telling people in my office that this had just happened. That some kind of werewolf creature scared the hell out of me. I passed out. It dragged me through the woods and placed me on a pile of bones. I wasn't doing it. And on top of that, my boss was giving me flack because this report about these otters was worth a whole hell of a lot of money to our organization. I remember sitting there in his office trying to come up with an excuse as to why I didn't have it done. And I couldn't. I couldn't come up with anything worthwhile, so I just told him I would have it to him by the end of the day. Getting up from that chair, walking out of his office door, headed down the hallway, and I'm thinking to myself, bro, this is about to be the worst report you have ever turned in your entire life. Understand, yes, I've been to that location 6 times, but this study required you got all the correct data. I needed more water samples. I needed actual stool samples from the otters themselves. Didn't have any of that. So now I'm sitting there at my desk trying to figure out how I'm going to put together this janky report when Sarah walks by. Now let me tell you a little bit about Sarah. She was what we called a wildlife biologist OG. When I tell you this woman had been all over the world, her and her husband traveled the entire world doing all kinds of crazy stuff, climbing mountains, swimming in oceans, just the most insane things on the planet is what she had done. I'm sitting there looking at her, and I don't know if it was that woman's intuition, but she says, "What's wrong? What happened?" Now, I need you to remember something. My nickname around the office is Otterman. I'm not really comfortable sharing what I encountered with anybody, so I blow it off. Nothing's wrong, everything's fine. She says, "No, you've seen something, something's wrong. Talk to me about it." I explained to her, "Listen, I don't feel comfortable discussing this in the office. We can go outside, and I'll tell you what happened." So we go outside to her vehicle, sit down, and I start to explain to her exactly what I encountered. The whole 9 yards, the otters swarming, coming down the river, the stillness in the woods, the feeling of something or someone rushing up on me, turning, seeing a blur, and then this thing being right there in my face, breathing on me passing out, waking up in a pile of bones, freaking out, taking off running, and getting back to the vehicle, going home, and not remembering how the hell I got home. I'm telling her all of this, and as I'm telling her this, she starts to cry. Are you listening to me? As I'm telling you this woman starts to cry. I'm talking about an ugly cry where all your makeup starts to run and smear. And I'm saying to myself, you asked me what was going on with me. And all of a sudden, you sitting here crying. Then she starts to unbutton her pants, and I'm saying to myself, what in the hell is going on here? She lifts up her shirt and shows me these scars on her ribs. And when I tell you it looked like a freaking dinosaur had bit her along the side of her rib cage and then decided it was going to twist its head back and forth, that's exactly what her skin looked like. She goes on to explain to me that she had an encounter in the same forest years ago with the exact same thing. It bit her, threw her around, slammed her into a tree. And the only reason why I let her go is because she sprayed bear mace directly down its throat. Imagine my surprise as I'm sitting there watching her tell me this story, tears running down her face, looking at the scars from her injury. Now get this, after she has her emotional breakdown, we're sitting there talking, and I explain to her the situation I find myself in, needing to have this report done. And I tell her, I said, "Listen, I will fudge these numbers before I go out to that location alone. Now, if you go back out there with me, I'll go get the rest of the data." She looks me dead in my eyes and says, "I suggest you get to fudging those numbers immediately. Because there's no guarantee that if you run into that thing again, that you're coming back out of those woods."